Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff Phillips with Accounting Fly. I hope everybody's having a fantastic afternoon. It's 2 o'clock on the East Coast, 2:05 to be exact. So we're going to go ahead and get started with today's session, which is always a very popular one when it comes to National Meet the Firms Week with the CPA exam, led by the team from Wiley, CPAexcel, and Mike Duffy. Thank you for being on the call. This is a part of National Meet the Firms Week, and so just a quick blurb about our event. Be sure you have your profiles on Accounting Fly built up. For those of you who were with us when we were called College Frog, it's the same team, same company. We just changed our name, and we did that because really for you, once you build a profile as an undergraduate, that is going to serve you for the rest of your career, because you'll be able to find entry-level jobs, experienced jobs. We want to help you find that CFO position 15 years from now. And so it will be a lifetime relationship. And part of that is career education. And that means we want to find the best experts, the most credible sources of advice, and give them to you at every stage along the career. And a lot of that for people starts with how to find a job or how to find an internship, and of course, a key part for everybody that starts with taking the CPA exam, which is absolutely critical to beginning a career, whether you're in public accounting, private accounting, no matter where you're going to start. So that's Meet the Firms Week. We're going to have webinars throughout the rest of the week. Let's see, tomorrow is Wednesday, and we're going to have the ACCA discussing careers with a global aspect, or global careers in accounting and finance. Many of you have asked us to bring in and learn more about what the global career spectrum looks like. This is a great session for you. That's at 2 o'clock Eastern. And Thursday, we're going to be talking about small firms. So everybody on the call knows about the Big Four, right? Well, did you know that there are tens of thousands of small firms in the U.S. who are owned by baby boomers who are going to be retiring over the next few years as you start your career? That's an interesting opportunity for an accounting grad to get into entrepreneurial opportunities with small firms. Darren Root of Rootworks has done this in his life, in real life, and will tell you about the lucrative career he has in small firm accounting. Friday will be our final session. It's going to be technology that you need to know about that will help you get jobs. And I don't mean job boards. I mean what you can learn as an accountant, like software tools for bookkeeping and accounting. And when you learn these tools that are free and available to you, show them to an employer, that employer is going to love you for it and makes you a lot more attractive candidate. Today we're going to be talking about the CPA exam. And I usually explain why that's important, but I don't really think I need to explain why this one's important to you today. It's absolutely critical, and we're very, very lucky to have a master teacher of the CPA exam in Mike Duffy. I'm going to introduce Mike in just a second, but let me do one quick thing. I want to do a quick rundown of who's on the call today. If you could use your question panel to type in the school you attend or the school you've graduated from, just type it into that GoToWebinar control panel and then hit, I think it's enter or submit. And I'd like to kind of read off some of the questions. Thanks for sending these in as they're rolling in. And the reason why we do this is I want to make sure that you know where the Q&A panel is, because I want you to ask questions. We've got the team from Wiley CPAexcel, Leslie Ann and Jeff Johnson. They're calling in from around the country. They're going to be answering your questions for you. We want you to leave this call equipped and ready to begin the process or know a lot more about the process. All right, Mike, so we got people calling in from students calling in from Western Governors University, Oregon State, University of Texas at Dallas, SUNY New Paltz, the Keller Graduate School, Liberty University, Cedar Crest College, Southern New Hampshire University, Bemidji State University, UMUC, San Diego State, Arkansas State, Shippensburg University, Houston University in Bangor, Maine, Creighton, Oregon Tech, Florida State, Brigham Young, George Mason. Okay, so literally all over the country here. Trinity Christian College, UT Arlington. Thank you guys. Awesome. I love seeing all the schools that are represented. Everybody gets a kick out of that. So You know how to ask questions. That's great. A couple of other pieces of housekeeping items. CPAexcel is a phenomenal product. I personally know accounting grads who have used it with great success. We're lucky enough to be able to offer you over email after the call a coupon code if you decide to go with CPAexcel, which I hope you will. We have an offer that we can give you for a coupon code for $100 off their package, one of their packages. And they also offer a 2-week free trial. I'm going to send you a link to those emails as well. And then lastly, they are also hiring for campus ambassadors around the country. So take a look at them on Accounting Fly. You can actually do a search in the keyword box of Accounting Fly for Wiley CPAexcel and see if they're looking for campus ambassadors at your school. It's a phenomenal opportunity where for very little work you basically can get a free license to take their CPA test prep. It's a matter of setting up a few meetings and helping coordinate activities at the school. And we know a lot of students who do it, and they love it. Okay, so business is out of the way. I want to bring in my friend Mike Duffy. Mike is Director of Business Development for Wiley CPAexcel, where he's responsible for the product and building the business for the CPA review and all their e-learning products. And Mike, I do want to plug the CMA Excel as well, because we have a lot of students who are interested in that. So I'm going to remind you about that at the end of the call. But guys, Mike began his practice with PwC in the audit practice after he graduated from Western Illinois, got an undergrad in accounting, and he's a CPA. Prior to joining Wiley CPAexcel, he was the National Program Director for Convisor Duffy CPA Review for 15 years and Director of Marketing for Becker Convisor CPA Review for 5 years. So Mike is on the board of Beta Alpha Psi, is an expert on this exam, and we're thrilled to have you here, Mike. So listen, take it away. I'll come back when there's some questions here at the end of the presentation, Mike. Thanks for being here, and the floor is yours.
Oh, it's great. Thanks for having me, Jeff. I just want to point out a couple of things that on the phone with me from my team is Leslie Ann, and so for those of you from the international market, Leslie Ann is an expert in assisting those from the international arena in getting and applying for the CPA exam prep. So add your questions into the mix in that area as well. And Jeff Johnson is a 25-year expert in CPA exam preparation, and he's one of the others that's joining me on the webinar to reply to your questions. So and toward the end of the call, everybody will join to assist you if you have questions that you'd like to throw out at us. So a couple of things. First off, Jeff, I want to say you're 100% correct. I heard your Thursday small firm meeting, and I just want to point something out. Mm-hmm. Just as a perspective, the Global 8 hire about 12,000 people a year, and those with less than that number of students to qualify, or rather employees to qualify for the Global 8, hire 36,000 of our graduates. So the reality is you really should be keeping your eyes and ears open for those small firm opportunities as well. And so I encourage you to participate in that call as well. I think that's great exposure. I had Big 8 experience. That was fantastic as well, but I would personally wouldn't have minded in retrospect having participated in a smaller firm's activities, just that you get exposed much quicker to clients at much higher levels, and you get exposed to the work level much quicker. So just a little snapshot from me, having worked in the world of Pricewaterhouse for almost 5 years. So with that, let's jump in, talk about the CPA exam. I'm going to, I think Jeff already gave my background. I think one thing I would like to share with all you very quickly is a little story, and this is how important the CPA exam is for us. And when I sat and passed the exam myself in Chicago, of course I had to sit and wait 3 or 4 months for my results. But the really fun thing happened is one day at work, while sitting in the offices of Chicago at Pricewaterhouse, I received a call. It was my brother. And he said, "Congratulations, Mike Duffy, CPA." And obviously you can think the thrill that ran down your spine that you just passed this thing. But my brother at that point, I said, "So you opened my note check?" And he said, "No." He said, "But it's a thin envelope, and you said it would be thin if you passed." in a short state of horror, I had him pop the envelope open, and lo and behold, passed. And I'm telling you, that day, to this day, was, I guess I'd have to say marriage, children, and opening and getting the results for the CPA exam kind of are the priorities and how they fell. And not only was I excited, but everybody in your family and your friends, it is quite a celebration. It's quite an accomplishment. So from the standpoint of, getting that CPA, obviously I can say there's nothing short of that as your route to success, whether that be in the world of accounting, public accounting, or if you decide to open your own business. It bodes very well with banks looking at your background to fund an operation you're looking at developing. Just a little FYI. More than just a CPA is what we are. So with that, should I take the exam? I'm going to make that pretty quick. We're going to talk about your plan, and we'll get into that in a moment. I want to chat about exam sequence, what I believe is the best strategy in taking the exam and why. Talk a little bit about test-taking strategies, probably one of the most overlooked and misunderstood parts of exam preparation. This is a big exam covering a lot of topics, but they only have so many questions they can throw at you. So we have to really take a look at that when we approach our test-taking strategies. I'll give you a few of my thoughts on suggested study approaches. We'll talk about exam site strategies and Prometric, which is the location that actually tests you. That's the group that the AICPA has hired to administer the CPA exam. By the way, similar, the CMA exam is now administered there as well. So with that, should we take the exam? I think I just said that to you. Financial rewards, instant credibility. This is an important note, job requirements. I hear a lot of students that will speak to me when I'm at events around the country, and they'll say, Mike, I'm not planning on going into public. I just want to go into corporate. I want to go into investment banking. And I then get to share with them my experience, which is really important. I was with Price Waterhouse, and then I left to become a corporate controller of a company that was private, took it public. And when I went through the process of hiring, it was quite interesting because I'd get resumes and I would sort them left and right. On the right pile would be those that had passed the CPA, and on the left would be those that hadn't. I would go through that entire pile of CPAs first, and the reason is very simple. I know that requires a certain commitment to work. It shows me a certain benchmark of, and don't be fooled by this, academic prowess. Don't think too hard about that. I know plenty of people that were, C students that passed the exam once they decided to get serious about their profession. And the reality is, when I sat there with the chief financial officer, his comment to the investors was, my entire staff are CPAs. So it goes beyond public accounting. In fact, it's probably absolutely essential at the corporate level that you obtain your CPA. Just a little misconception. And even that, it's just passing the exam. You don't have to necessarily get licensed and have years of experience, but that you can tell somebody that you passed the CPA exam is the benchmark that the corporate world is looking for. So with that, we're going to talk about your plan a little bit. And when we look at plans, we have to think, well, what is a plan all about? And then we look at, well, why do we fail? And ultimately, the simple answer to that is we fail to plan. And I learned this many years ago, and I'm going to talk about that briefly. And it was something called the Harvard study, and it studied the graduating class of Harvard. Well, 3% of that group had written goals, and the remaining 97% did not. 20 years hence, they did a study of that group, and that group was worth more financially than the remaining 97% of the graduating class. So over the years, it was pretty obvious that as we look at planning, that really that is front and center, not only to your exam preparation, but literally is that important to your personal life as well, from financial planning to your spiritual needs, etc. So taking a plan really goes beyond the obvious, and that's something that I can't stress enough, is that you start now. You haven't had classes on planning, time management. The reality is we don't, but it is time to start that process. Now, when I look at that whole world of exam planners, it actually, as a result of the studies I went through with the Harvard study and going back into the late 80s, early 90s, that inspired me to, in the preparation world, is introduce these sophisticated software tools that created a plan for you and provided you with the appropriate guidance. And just to give you a very quick snapshot, and then I'm going to move on to some of my other topics here. In the software, the way we've designed it, we said, well, if you don't have a plan, I know you're not going to succeed. So the software is going to give you a plan. And it's even designed in a way that you put a beginning date when you're planning on studying and enter the date you're planning on sitting for the exam. And then the software calculates how many hours it's going to take a week based on your parameters. And that's based on the last 5,000 students that have taken the CPA exam with us in that area and passed. So you're really getting an absolutely definitive metric. So to move on past the software, that generates this little chunk of information that I thought you all might find useful. And I get this question all the time, how much time should I be studying for this? So looking at my studying times, we see FAR here at 130, auditing 80, regulation 110, and BEC at 70. So that gives you a parameter on which you can base your time, how much time you need to commit to the respective sections of the exam. And I know there may be a temptation, and we're going to talk about this from an exam sequence, but let's not get fooled to say, well, I'm going to do this one first, it's only 70 hours, and this one's 80, and then I'll do this one here and this one there. We're going to go through a brief discussion to talk about what perhaps is the most logical sequence to approach this exam. So a couple of other notes. Let's briefly look at, we have requirements. We have 55 jurisdictions out there. Some states require 150 hours, some require 120 hours in order to sit. Many states require that ultimately you get to 150 to be, and I want you to pay attention to this, quote unquote, licensed. Now, I referred earlier to the corporate job market, and I said if I was sitting there and you were coming to me, you wanted a job, and you had 120 hours, you were able to sit, you passed the exam, and you came in, you literally in your resume would say, here's my name, and you would say, accomplishments, passed the CPA exam in May of 2014. That is absolutely sufficient for me to make a basis on which to hire you that you passed the CPA exam, not that you're licensed. The licensed community is if you continue in the arena of public accounting and you get to a point where you're a partner, or for that point a manager. Some firms have requirements you must be a CPA before you're promoted to manager. But to be licensed means you're signing various works, such as an audit opinion. So I just want to make that really abundantly clear that it's critical that you take the exam, and even if it's at 120, don't worry about the 150 licensing part. You can always take those hours later if you work at a firm. You needn't worry about going in right from the get-go with 150. In order to make sure that you're on the right track, we have people at our offices that assist students in this process as well. But as you see right there, to learn more, go to NASBA.org exam, CPA exam, and you can look up the various jurisdictions in which you are located and where you plan on sitting and practicing. And that'll give you some of this detailed information that you need to understand. Also, if you go to our websites at Wiley, CPAexcel.com or CPAexcel.com, you'll find information regarding the various state requirements as well. So once again, interestingly enough, this involves a planning process. So take the few minutes out to read through what your requirements are for your state so that you can get the ball rolling and then get into the application process. So let me talk very briefly about this, and I want to point out just a few things for you as students. These are the 4 major sections of the exam, and the AICPA is kind enough to provide us a content specification outline, and it tells us what we're supposed to know. Not only that, it says, well, in these various topics, here's what we think is important. So as you see, auditing and attestation in the upper left, 12 to 16% of the exam is based on engagement acceptance and understanding the assignment. Great. 16 to 20 is on internal controls and environment. So they give you a good bit of advice and guidance as to what is going to be on the exam by major category, and that's important. And the reason it's important, when we look down here, there's 2 areas in particular that I look, and that's financial accounting and reporting, many students are not required to take governmental and non-for-profit. And if you look at this, those two categories are 8 to 12%. So add those two together, 16 to 24% of the financial accounting and reporting exam are governmental and not-for-profit accounting. Now, the reason I point this out is, do we cover this in our course? Absolutely we do. But if I had my choice, I would take advantage if I'm still in school, and I had options for electives such as a governmental class at many universities, I would take it. Even if you can take it pass-fail, just take it so that you get a much broader understanding of governmental and not-for-profit, so it's not as challenging when you confront that on the CPA exam. But an interesting point to note, 20% of the exam is there. Now, next, if we jump over to regulation, this is another interesting one. When we're looking at the first two categories of ethics and business law, it's kind of 40% of the exam. 60% is taxation. Now, as you notice, there is a lot of schools will have individual taxation, and you see that at second from the bottom at 13 and 19%. But some do not require, it's called advanced taxation, or entities, or whatever title they assign to it. And as you see right there, up to 24% of the test and regulation is federal taxation entities. Once again, do we cover this in a CPA review course? Yes, we do. Having said that, though, I would take advantage of your opportunities at school to get some credit hours for sitting, and also a course that will help you immensely in getting ready for the exam itself. So that's my advice on the content spec outline that I think is that's pretty important. Now, as far as CPA exam scoring, this is a tough one, because in the old days we used to have no scores from 69 to 74 were released. You either failed with a 69 or passed with a 75. Nowadays they give you your exact score. So I have talked to students who literally hit 74 on the head, which means, ouch, they missed by one question. So for those that experience that, I tell them if you immediately go back the next quarter, you'll increase your score by anywhere from 10 to 20%. So it's going to be a slam dunk. You're going to pass. So don't get discouraged. Just go back right at it right away. You can pass one section at a time, which is nice. In the old days, you couldn't. But you have to pass all four parts within 18 months once you do pass a part. So that clock begins, boom, pass this part, 18 months to go, which should be more than sufficient. But given that it's online, it does create an environment that we can procrastinate. So strongly encourage you to take your parts and continue moving down the pipeline with a plan so that you're able to achieve that passing. Actually, I would hope to prepare and have it done within 12 months. Registration tips, very quick one here. Only register for the parts you plan to prepare for. First, it gives you a little bit of flexibility, and sometimes the states that you register for, if you don't complete them within a window, you have to re-register and you have to pay more money. So once again, that involves timing, and it also involves the registration requirements by your specific state, which you can go to that NASBA.org and get all the information you need on that. This is something, too, when you apply for the exam, the NTS is notice to schedule. And some states are very, very quick. Literally, it's in a week, and others can take up to 6 weeks. So once again, in your planning process, you have to build that in. So go to your state, identify the estimated times, look at when you plan on sitting, and then, of course, the hours I gave you for each part that you're required to study to help you pass. Build that all into your planning schedule, a real key. For those not familiar, the exam testing windows, as you see, you can sit in January, February, not March, April, May. As you see, the green buttons are when you actually are allowed to sit for the exam. The nice thing is that you can sit for 1, 2, 3, or all 4, for that matter, in a window. I wouldn't encourage that. If you're in a position to sit for one, say, in the first week of April, and then you're going to go into a less demanding section, say auditing, and you can sit by the end of May, feel free and do that. But otherwise, don't overly put yourself into an unrealistic time frame. As I said, I look at roughly a 9-month window to complete all 4 very comfortably. You can absolutely move quicker, but I would use that type of approach as a logical way to prepare for the exam. The thing is, if you do fail a section in a given month, you can't take it again in that window. You'll have to defer that to a subsequent window. Just a little picture here so you see what that notice to schedule actually looks like. A little information here for all of you just to give you a focus. And this is the exam format and the section weighting. So as you can see here, we have, 4 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, relatively consistent. We have a multiple choice component of the exam, and 3 sections are 60-40, right? So we have audit, FAR, and reg, all the same. BEC is a little bit of an aberration, 85% multiple choice, and then that is the only section that you're required to do written communications in. So they've removed that from our auditing, FAR, and regulation, which quite frankly is really nice, and that you needn't worry about that as part of the process in preparing for those 3 sections of the exam. So that gives you a little bit of, snapshot there, hold on here, I think I jumped ahead. Well, actually, let's jump into something else. When I look at the components of the exam, the 60-40, this is for all of you to be aware. There's a lot of attempts at studying for the exam, kind of, throwing your hat in the ring and doing something simple, maybe grabbing a book, kind of doing it on your own. But one of the real important things you must get access to is a software product at a minimum that puts you through the exact rigor of the CPA exam. So this literally I had built into our software. As you can see, this is kind of interesting. Here's this little planning. It's from 2013 screenshot, but it goes through each of the assignments and when you need to do those and complete those. And then here it actually has a simulated CPA exam in there. So that's part of your study process, and I make you, or request that you do this at a minimum 1 week prior to your sitting date. And when you click on that little button, literally you actually get a simulated CPA exam. You get the 3 multiple choice testlets for this one, task-based simulations. So and by the way, everything you see here is the exact instruction you get at the Prometric Testing Center. So it's really important as a student to go through that process and see what the real exam looks like. For instance, here, this is what the multiple choice format is. This isn't what we designed. This is what the AICPA and Prometric have designed. So you see, no ABCD, right? A very kind of strange laid out screen. You answer the question, pick it, and then go down to the lower corner down here to hit next to move on to your next question. So what we do is we replicate in our software that exact experience that you have at Prometric, just to make sure in other words, what you do in practice, you do in the game. Here for you that have not seen these, this is what a task-based simulation looks like. In a task-based simulation, that's 40% of 3 parts of your exam. Now, just to understand what those are, they replace something that we used to call a long problem. You used to have these big, long problems that you had to work out. So then they came up with this idea of a assignment called a task-based simulation, and there'd be 7 tasks in there. 6 of those would be graded, 1's thrown away. And those 6 are really kind of like, I'd say, long multiple choice questions. And in this example here, you see that there's a question being answered on top, or question posed, and then it goes through 4 or 5 different scenarios and says, hey, could you pick out what type of risk this plays in this audit of this company? So as you see, it's not necessarily that you're required to do long worksheets and calculations and whatnot. So there's a lot of different task-based simulation formats that you'll be presented with. So that's one of the keys in using a software product, to make sure you're practicing the way this exam looks, because this is the exact structure and the exact interface that you're going to be experiencing when you go to Prometric. And the last thing you want on your list is opening up an exam like this, not being familiar with the format, and struggling with that, because the time on the exam is tight, and that is not a time to learn how software works. That should have been done previously. So just a little guidance there. All right, let's talk about exam sequence. I want to talk about what I call the big rock theory. And by the way, this applies to everything in your life. That is, when you wake up in the morning and you have work to do, a lot of times we have the ability of deferring the harder task until later. And under the big rock theory, that would be the opposite. We'd be taking the most difficult item and taking that first. So when I take the big rock theory and I apply that to the CPA exam, I look at the 4 sections. And the reality is, we're all tempted to do things like, oh, I know auditing. I know BEC. Those are easier. They have higher pass rates. Well, I would strongly encourage you to do the big rock theory, which is get the big one out first. And that would be get the financial accounting and reporting section out of the way first. Then I would probably follow that by my auditing. Then I do regulation, and last, BEC. Now, a lot of students say, why would you do BEC last? And it's very simple. The essays that I spoke to you about earlier, the only place they appear is in the BEC section of the exam. And often, the content that they ask you to write about has come from financial accounting and reporting and auditing. So, and it's not that they're overly judging the technical content of the material, but for a student who is going to begin writing an answer on, say, explain to the board something about pension expense, and you suddenly are attempting to write an essay and you can't remember the basic concepts of that, it's going to create a problem that you needn't had dealt with in the first place. So the other reason I have you do FAR first is so that the most difficult one is passed. Now start your 18-month clock. What good news? Can you imagine getting to the end of at month 16, you have FAR left, and you're sitting there going, wow, I let the most difficult, longest part to the end, and I have to wrap it up in 2 months, or I start losing credit for other sections I passed. So what you want to do is do the big rock theory and approach it that way. Strongly encourage you to do that. So, this is probably one of my kind of favorite topics. I want to talk about pass rates, and I want to talk about something called pre-test questions. This is the strategy section. So let's talk about pass rates and pre-test. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is a combination of 2013 and 14 pass rates. The cumulative there shows the cumulative pass rates for all of 2013. You see that 45.87 in audit. There's the temptation. Look at that, 55.83 in BEC, which is why I tell you to wait to the last. 48 in FAR, and 48 in regulation. Now, the reason I wanted to give you this is to kind of take a look at the various fluctuations in pass rates. So if we go over to January, February, I plugged in the 2014 pass rates for those 2 windows. You kind of get a flavor for what's going on. FAR, let's go down to FAR. We have 44, then it goes to 47, those goes to 51, and then back down to 45. And I've tried to get from the AICPA what they think the fluctuations are. And really, they don't have much conclusion on it other than they usually tend to think that, pass rates, float better in the April and July windows just because of the way people prepare for the exam versus they float into the fall and they're working at firms and companies. And in January, February, maybe it's some students not putting as much effort in. But yet, if you look at those percents, none of those claims substantiate themselves. So I take a look kind of at the cum, and it gives you a rough idea that basically you have a 50% chance of passing this thing on your first shot. So don't be afraid of the exam. Realize if prepared properly for it and understand strategies and techniques, you'll do great. You really will do well. So let's move from the actual detailed metrics, but you see the far right there. It gives you your snapshot, right? We can do pretty well there. And let's get into the real key on the exam I want to talk about. So as we say, not every question counts. So I'm going to take you through a little exercise here. Over on the left, we have multiple choice questions. And then down below, we have task-based simulations. Now let's go talk about multiple choice. We have 2 categories of multiple choice. We have something called operational. You see here 75. Let's just stay on auditing. Then we have something called pretest, which is 15 questions. And we have a total of 90 multiple choice for auditing. And I kind of look at this sometimes and I'm like, wow, look at that far. My entire career is going to be based on 90 multiple choice questions. But then I stop and say, not only is it not 90, it is only 75 because the pretest questions don't count. So when I'm looking at my questions, let's roll into this next screen here to really bring a point of reference here. So my pretest questions for auditing is 15, 75 operational, total of 90 questions. So literally, as I'm going through this entire auditing exam, only 75 questions are going to count toward my grade. And when you're looking at questions that you don't understand, that seem confusing to you, that you've never covered in college, and the CPA review course didn't even mention it, remember that those type of questions have a very strong probability of being pre-test type questions, and they're not being scored. Okay, so that is an extraordinary point when you keep focused. Let's go down to the task-based simulations. There'll be 7 tabs in your task-based sim. Now, when I talk to students, I guide them on this. As you're going through those questions and you find a task-based simulation, one of the tabs, and you're like, wow, I don't know I really didn't cover much on third-tier inheritance tax, or I didn't cover this. Well, if you didn't cover that, and it has not been driven home to you by college or by your preparation program for the exam, then once again, the pretest question may be floating out a question, just trying to find the knowledge or the base knowledge in the marketplace with regard to that topic. So I'm going to give you a little example of several students that I've spoken to as they go through the process, and give you a little bit of guidance as well on that final step of when you're physically sitting at the exam and how you deal with it. But from an overall snapshot, look at that, pretest. My gosh, that's it. Let's go across the operational. What do you got there? 150, 120, 270 questions in multiple choice format, which, by the way, are represented in the task-based sim approach as well. But look at that. That's how many questions they're really ultimately judging whether you're qualified to sit. So the content on the exam is broad. There's a lot of it, but it's not deep. So we try to get you into the patches of exactly what the profession wants you to know in order to enter that profession, quote unquote, by passing the CPA exam. One other thing, when I talked about the BEC section, I said there's 3 essays. Even under the 3 essays, one of those is thrown out. So they may throw an IFRS type question at you in BEC, and you're sitting there going, oh, I thought this wasn't a big deal on the exam. And it's not. But all of a sudden, there's your mindset, and they're trying to see what information is out there and seeing what somebody writes in a narrative format for them to go back and review that information for simply information gathering purposes. So in every one of these scenarios, when you're looking at those 6 tabs in RAG or 7 in foreign audit, you know one of them is being thrown out. So use logic. If one really seems tough and it makes no sense, don't panic. Get your other ones done, and then do some answer in there just to see if you can pick up some points if you, in fact, were choosing the wrong one as a quote-unquote pretest question. I usually hear from those that they seem relatively obvious, and it's not uncommon to have 2 very strange ones as well. But once again, you have to use your best logic there. So let's talk about exam site strategies. I want to make sure I keep you on task here because we only have a handful of minutes left. So exam site strategies. I always tell everybody to allocate the minimum time to your multiple choice questions. Allocate minimum times to your study on your questions. Now, the reason is when we get into the task-based simulations, once again, the format and structure, unusual. It can just take you a little more time to be comfortable. And remember, it's worth 40% of the exam in those 3 sections, so we just don't want to miss getting as many points out of the long or task-based sims as possible. Now, what I brought up here is I wanted to do a little case study. And what I'm talking about here is these are people that I've actually worked with and have gone through the exam that follow up with me to see, is the experience consistent with what I have approached or told them how to approach it. And this is interesting. So here it is. Both a student and a professor experienced the identical thing. A professor, my friend of mine, wanted to take the exam. He's 50, and he already passed the CMA and said, maybe I should take the CMA, and did so. A student, likewise, 2 years out of school, working in an auditing department, went in. Both of them experienced an ideal or identical scenario, and that is they worked on their first set of multiple choice questions in their FAR section of the exam, and they said, yeah, first 30 went quite easy. I think I did really well. And just as I told them to expect, when they opened up their second testlet, they started saying, God, there must have been 10 IFRS questions. I said, right. So exactly what that was telling them, and I told them ahead of time to expect this, is basically they had done so well that the examiners now flipped in. They're saying basically this student's on a easy on a pass track. So now they're going to throw the the pre-test questions at them, and they'll tend to bunch them up. And all of a sudden they end up getting a pile of strange questions either on IFRS or international globalization, very strange type questions. And they had the initial sense of panic, but they remember what I told them. If you crank through the first 30 and did very, very well, all of a sudden you're going to get a handful of the pre-test questions. Remember, out of the 90, 15 pre-tests are in there, and pre-tests are exactly that. They're trying to find out what knowledge is out there, and there probably isn't a lot. So you'll probably be caught off guard by those. So each of them went through that process, and they said they got to their third testlet, and I said third testlet kind of balanced back out reasonably well. Still had a handful of probably pre-test questions, and then I said, yeah, once again felt comfortable in there. And long story short, they both ended up with scores in the 90s, and they were both shocked. But I said, if you follow the strategies and understand the game that's happening to you, you're not going to be caught off guard by what the examiners are throwing at you. So that's a little piece of advice. All right, let's talk briefly here about Prometric. This is just a screenshot. This is what a Prometric location looks like. Just a couple of very basic rules I'm going to throw at you, and that is these are just the really important ones to be aware of. Two types of ID. You're going to need a license, passport, any other form of official ID that you have. Remember, that's going to be critical and has to match your application that you put in the CPA exam. They're going to give you a locker. There's a lot of biometrics going on there. There's a photo ID, and then there's fingerprint. You know, every time you leave or go in and out of that exam room, you have to be admitted back in and actually have to go through these fingerprint scans as well. Empty your pockets. This is not unlike the airport, and there is a metal detector scan, right? So basically, this is as close as you can get to the TSA in the Prometric Testing Center. Now, not only when I mentioned the empty your pockets, and it really is kind of crazy, but as you see the guy behind him, it's like he's got a, I don't know, metal detector, and literally the student is in there having to pull their pockets inside out. So this is no joke. This is exactly what you have to do. So be prepared for Prometric testing centers being very, very disciplined on their processes. Rules and regulations. There are no pencils and papers. There's note boards and special writing devices. The time you allocate to the exam, they're going to give you 4 hours, and then they'll give you 30 minutes for instructions and survey. Those two do not combine into a 4-hour and 30-minute exam. They're broken up and separately allocated. So you just have to be aware of that when you go into the exam. So to kind of talk about my suggested study approach, I think it's pretty clear from me how I approach these things, and that is follow a plan, work all questions in the exam format, and I'm saying when students go through our software, I encourage them to complete 90% of all questions correctly at least once. That is a real key to passing this exam. Repetition is memory, so even though you may have to go through a question several times, that will bode well in your memory retention. And remember, there's something on the exam called discriminating questions. So a lot of the old exam questions that we filter through the software, they're updated for changes in technical content. You're going to see some of those questions on the exam. It's just the way they do it. So the next, take full practice exams. This is really important so you get the experience of sitting in a room isolated for 4 hours. I know it sounds like no big deal, but trust me, it is a bit of an endurance test as well. So once again, that I build into our software to make sure you go through that experience. And by the way, I suggest you go through it a couple of times. Learning material on a topic-by-topic basis, you may perform well because you start getting comfortable in the area. And the exam environment is good because it forces you to switch from topic to topic back to another topic. And so that could identify some areas that you don't have nailed down as well as you thought. And the software, if designed properly like ours, will give you actually the analytics on the CPA exam you just took in the areas that you performed poorly and allow you to go back in and work those areas. And that, of course, is my final comment, review areas of weakness. Now, as a pulling it all together, my final thoughts. Number one, we have pass rates that are floating at 50 percentile, right? So that is, I know from an exam standpoint that probably doesn't sound great. If you're in college, you go, wow, it's only 50% of us pass an exam in a college class. That would be terrible. But you have to remember the pass rates in the old days were around 23, 4%. So the pass rates have increased dramatically. Secondly, your college classes you're taking are preparing you for this type of exam. Not the focus and the refinement of what you need to pay attention to, but you're getting the core content that will get you ready to prepare for the test. Other than the information I gave you earlier in those FAR section and the, with regards to taking governmental classes and regulation with advanced tax, corporate entities, those are things that you can add to make sure that your college preparation and classes really, really prepare you well for the upcoming exam. And the next is if you get guidance through a prep program. When I add those three together, prep, college classes, and your guidance from your prep courses, you should be in an outstanding position to pass. And I show you a slide here on a student pricing structure that we have, and actually our pass rates. And this is a 6-year average. Actually, the most recent ones are higher. But you're seeing what the average student is doing that is preparing properly for the exam. You'll pass it, and you'll get through it quickly. So make sure you don't lose focus on that as well. Moving to one more screen, I want to give you my email. That's mikeduffy@wiley.com if there's any questions you'd like to directly shoot to me. So feel free to do that. And I know here in a moment we're going to be turning back over to Jeff to throw out some questions at us. But once again, from a product standpoint, I am extremely proud of our product, the Wiley CPA Excel program. And as you see there, we have been chosen by a Big Four firm for their staff. So that's been recognized, and we also work with 50 universities as well. So it's an outstanding program for you, and for those that choose to do it, it is continuously updated, and there's no retake fees. That's kind of our commitment to you. Once you're with us, we want to get this exam passed for you. So that's it, Jeffrey. I think I'll open the call up for discussion and questions at this time, if that's appropriate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mike. And and just so you know, you're probably not aware of this, but the audience has asked a ton of questions for Leslie Ann and Jeff. We've been sort of in the background answering questions. Thanks to everybody for these questions. I do want to get into the questions, but I would like to just say, speaking of this last slide, that I want to brag on CPAexcel because it is a fantastic program, and I feel like the way you guys embrace technology, the fact that it's so digital, you can do these in bite-sized lessons, and the way it's broken down and how the lessons sort of build on top of one another. It means that people who are busy can really fly through the training as long as they're diligent, and so it's just a great product. It's a great affordable product too. And you already referenced how it's best in class for a lot of firms, including one of the Big Four. So I'll get back to that in a minute. But Mike, I do have a few questions, and you guys can keep them coming in if you'd like. But so we have a few underclassmen on the call, and the question that we saw was, should I worry about the CPA exam now if I'm a sophomore? What do you think, Mike?
Well, you know what? It's kind of interesting because if they're a sophomore, depending on the university they go to, they're going to get exposed to a product known as KESO Intermediate. And the importance of the exam starting at a younger age can't be underestimated. So we actually, with universities that use KESO, which is the vast majority, we actually have the CPAexcel product integrated with the KESO textbook. So a student that is in sophomore year and is going to start getting exposed to intermediate accounting is actually going to start getting exposed to the CPA exam questions related to the topics that they're covering. So, and I think as time goes on here, you're going to see more and more of the books integrated with some of the software for them to get exposure to it. And if they're fully committed to accounting, the CPA. The reality is they could, and I'm not saying and trying to force or encourage necessarily students to start buying our program now, but the reality is they could buy a prep program such as ours. They could use it literally through their 2 or 3 years of school. And it's kind of funny because, say, they're taking an auditing class with a professor. A lot of the questions that auditing faculty use on their exams are actually old CPA exam questions. And we actually provide that to our students with video presentations. You know, there's like 90 hours of lecture on there. So it is something they should be thinking about at a young age or at a young point in their college experience. So even at that sophomore level, I wouldn't say worry about it, but I would say take advantage of tools and information in the market that can help you. So, for instance, this is an interesting one, Jeff. You know, we talk about opportunities for students, and we actually have student reps that are on campus, or ambassadors, whatever you would like to refer to them as, but they get access to all of our content when they join us as student reps. So for somebody that's a sophomore and very interested in the CPA exam, as this young person is, you know, they should reach out to you or to one of our folks. I guess I could say myself. You could shoot a note to me, and I'll forward that to the appropriate regional director, who may bring you on as a student rep, and you'll get access to it and can start reviewing the content in each of the classes as you go through those. So there are ways of taking advantage of what we offer. On the other side, I mean, I wouldn't get panicked about it. You're only a sophomore, but there's nothing wrong with preparing for the kind of exam over a longer period of time. So when you walk into that, this is a joke to you. You've been doing this since sophomore year. You know, boom, walk in, pass, and move on to your career.
Mike, another question that I was actually going to ask, but somebody articulated better than me. With the AICPA announcing the CPA exam will change in 2017, we've seen a lot of news about that.
Right.
What should we prepare for if we can't finish the exam prior to the changes? Is there any information out there as to what changes will be made?
No, I mean, they're still being very speculative on what they want to introduce. You know, and some of it is they go out, what they do when they change the CPA exam, they go out to the industry, and then they solicit comments back from practitioners and say, what are the expectations of, what are you expecting the new staff to possess? What type of skills should they possess? So that is the process where they go out to, you know, literally thousands of firms and ask for feedback. Once they get the feedback, they get information such as, well, they want the students to be more skilled in the use of, you know, Excel. They want them, so, you know, so they start then looking at how do they introduce these skill sets into the exam format. So, you know, the content is going to be the same type of content that we're all experienced to, but they're now looking at how do we add technology components into the CPA exam. You know, from everything from you know, planning and management, right, to project management, to not just ask a question, but what can we do to change the way we deliver a test. And I don't expect this to be any type of massive change, just like now there was a big change when they went computerized, right? That was a big change. But after that, some of the changes are really more just, well, what are we going to ask them to do to show they're proficient? And I wouldn't panic about it. My gut instinct, based on the speed with which the Institute changes things, it won't be some overwhelming change. It will be a change that will introduce some modest steps, just like kind of the research tabs that they now have in the task-based simulations, right? So that's one of their new things. Okay, open up, you're going to take a task-based sim question, and then it says, oh, here's the question. Now you research where this is found in our material, and then you just enter in the respective sections. So that was a big thing that was generated out of one of these surveys of firms years ago. They wanted to know, are these students capable of searching through the professional literature to find an answer to a question? So that gave rise to the research question on the exam. Not terribly complicated. In fact, I think it's quite easy. On the other hand, you know, some people panic over it, but it's really quite easy. So that's my expectation. Don't panic. This will be handled over the years with our, you know, CPA prep. We get information ahead of time as to what they're looking to do, And we'll be releasing products well in advance of the exam for any student to take a look at how it's done, just like we do here, to assist you in practicing exactly what that format will look like. It will not be alien to us, and it won't be alien to our students that go through our programs. They'll get firsthand knowledge of exactly what the examiners are going to be presenting them with.
Fantastic. Mike, what's the average time it takes to complete the exam? I know it's a loaded question, but what are you seeing?
Oh, you mean actually?
Just all in. Like, how long does it typically? I know CPAexcel. You get it until you pass. Basically, you said that earlier. But how long does it take people on average to pass?
To get through all four sections?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I've asked actually the AICPA for that. The only thing I can get is insights directly from our students. And what we're seeing is roughly about a 10-month window is what people are completing it in. So they're taking a dark month, right? They're taking the month of, say, December, and they're preparing for, or say November and December, and they're preparing for financial, and they go after that the first week in January. And then toward the end of February, they take, remember I told you other sections like auditing, you could take that second if you wanted, and that's going to take 70 hours. And then they go after that and sit at the end of February and try to get 2 in a window. Or they take financial in window 1, they take 2 sections in window 2, and then 1 section in their third window. So they're looking at about a 10-month process.
Got it.
So it's not bad. It's not bad at all.
Yeah. No, it's really not.
I mean, a lot of people in our course actually push it through in 4 to 6 months. I don't think you need that sense of urgency like that. You know, it's nice that you can do a little more pacing and you can take a couple of week break in between. I sat for this one. I'm going to take 2 weeks off. You know, re-energize, take care of some personal business, and then move into your next section. So take your time. 10 months to 12 is a good time frame. And you know, if you're moving along that path and you're looking to work with a firm, if you have passed 1 part or 2 parts, even that's relevant to a firm or some company hiring you. Okay, so you know you don't have to have all 4 parts wrapped up and done and in bed, you know, to go talk to a company. They'll ask that question and say, yeah, I already passed my financial section and I'm sitting for my next section, and they'll say, oh, fantastic, right? So that's my recommendation.
Mike, we had 4 or 5 people chime in and ask who they talk to about becoming student ambassadors, Wiley student ambassadors. Can you maybe put your email address back up on the screen? And I imagine you'd be okay if they just emailed you and you could route them to the right person?
Right there.
Fantastic.
Oh, you know what? Do me a favor. If you want, I think Mike Duffy works. I believe that works. Jeff Johnson is on the line here. He can confirm that. I also have an alternate one they have for me. It's M.I. Duffy.
At Wiley.com?
Right.
I'm going to send that out over the chat, Mike, right now. Okay. That's M.I. Duffy at Wiley.com, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, fantastic. And that sounds like an outstanding program. So, you know, definitely drop Mike a line if you're interested in participating in that.
Yeah.
So Mike, okay, last question. I know that, so yesterday we had the Institute of Management Accountants talking about starting your career in you know, in-house and talked about their CMA exam.
Right.
Does Wiley CPAexcel have any test prep around the CMA exam?
Oh yeah. We're actually one of the official partners with the IMA and just released a product literally 2 weeks ago. So in there, it's kind of an interesting approach. So we've used our existing, obviously our software platform that's been very effective in CPA, and added our CMA content in there. You know, part 1 and part 2. We've also done some, you know, I think interesting approaches to it. So there's, you know, there would be an introductory video, but then in areas that students may have more difficulty with, you know, so when it's an absorption costing problem or, you know, something like that, we have something we've added to the course called deep dive videos. And it's when students have difficulty in areas that are common, all of a sudden, not only can they watch the overview lecture and then work on questions, they can hit the deep dive to really go through the, you know, the nuts and bolts of a problem like that. So if they're having difficulty, it's almost as good as going back to a personal college class where the professor's going, okay, let me show you exactly how this works. So So that product, and it has the same guarantees as our CPA review, which is you don't get to use it until you pass. So that's a product that we're pretty excited about, and that can be really helpful in the CMA review market as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of great options out there. We had a couple questions that Jeff and LA are still working on. So if you who asked a question are still waiting for an answer, hang tight while Jeff and Leslie Ann work through those. So let's wrap things up. I want to make 2 quick points, Mike, and then I'll give you the last word. So we have promoted this. Wiley CPAexcel was nice enough to offer a free platinum course worth roughly $2,200 to someone who attended this webinar, which I think is pretty outstanding. So thanks again, guys, for doing that. What we are going to do is we'll pull the report of who attended. So you had to be here to win it. And then randomly pick a winner, and we will be notifying you by Monday of Monday the 13th of October. So no later than that. Hoping to get you that information before that. Secondly, we'll be looking for an email from us for a couple of things. One, I've had probably 15 people ask if they could have a recording of the webinar. We will be sending that out so that you have this as a resource. And 2, we'll be sending out a coupon code that will give you a discount as an Accounting Fly student on their product, as well as a link to the 2-week free trial. So, Mike, great stuff as always. Thanks for educating us. I hope that we can do one again even before the next Meet the Firms week, because it always is such an important topic. Any last words as we part ways here today, Mike?
Oh no, I mean, I just want to say it is a pleasure doing it, and I think it's a great service that you provide the students to get exposure. I wish I had this. I wish I had 2 things: exposure like this and software back then when I was in their position. So it's a great thing that you provide everybody, and I hope they all appreciate it and take advantage of it. So thanks for having us as well today. Appreciate it.
You got it. So Jeff, if you can have any, I'll stay on if you want to. Help you with a couple extra questions. But to all the students on the audience and new hires who are thinking about the CPA exam, hopefully this was extremely valuable. I know it was. Thanks for being a part of Meet the Firms Week. Thanks for Mike, Jeff, and Leslie Ann doing this webinar today. We will see you guys soon. Have an awesome afternoon, and we'll talk down the road. Bye for now.
Okay, bye now.
Bye-bye.